So the theme of these conversations is the relationship between faith and reason, God and the university, and particularly your vocation as a computer scientist and your religious faith. So I was wondering if you could just tell me a little bit about your religious background, your religious journey, I guess, as people like to say.
Sure. My religious background, I guess most people start with their childhood, but mine was really that of a proud atheist. I thought, first of all, I just didn't think about religion in the beginning. Then later I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where a lot of people talked about religion, and I got very turned off about it. I thought it was just for people who were non-thinking, or it was a crutch, or it was just something people did because they grew up with it.
Were your parents just skeptics? And did you have any childhood religious?
No, they just never talked about religion, and we didn't go to church. We did celebrate Christmas with a Christmas tree, but there was never any signs of religiosity associated with it, which was fine with me.
You got the presents, and
Yeah, I got the presents. That's all that mattered, right? As a kid, right? Get your presents and give your presents, and believe that there's something magical about Christmas that you're always trying to figure out what it is, even unless you know the real reason for Christmas. And I had neighbors who were Christians who kept inviting me to church. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to wear a dress or a skirt. I didn't like the idea of church.
Right, and in the South, you actually have to wear a
dress. Exactly.
Right.
It's so funny how it's these trappings of what it is that are, so easily rejected. And eventually they said, after I think like 6 weeks in a row of faking stomach aches to get out of Sunday morning churches, they said, maybe you don't have to go to church, but what matters most is what you believe. Have you read the Bible? And I thought, I've heard that's the best-selling book of all time. No, I haven't read it. Maybe I should, because I considered myself a smart person. I should read the Bible. So I got one of those read the Bible through a year, checkbox. I think it was called The Way. It was one of those paraphrase versions. And I started reading the Bible. And to my not wanting to tell anybody what was happening in me, I started to change. It started to change me. And I thought it would be sort of full of fantastical, crazy stuff. They actually had me start with Proverbs, which was smart because it was full of so much wisdom that I'd read a few verses and I'd have to put it down and ponder what was going on here. And it immediately hit me with my sort of intellectual arrogance that I had a lot to learn from what was written here. Yeah, I don't know. They might have known. They never talked to me much about it. They were very quiet about anything church or religion related. In fact, I never knew my mom had any opinions about it until I came home one day and said, "Mom, I want you to know I'm leading the debate team for evolution against creation. I'm on the evolution side, and we're going to whomp those stupid creationists." And she said, "But the Bible's an important book." And my jaw dropped. I'm like, "What do you mean the Bible's an important book? I've never seen anybody look at it in our house. I knew we had one."
So this was, you were an early teenager, basically. And so then how did that ultimately translate into religious practice?
Yeah, after reading the Bible, and I still didn't want to go to church. I still didn't want to identify as a Christian because I still didn't like what all of that was. But I did have to wrestle with the fact that that I was believing in God, and I still wasn't quite sure about Jesus. And then I went off to college, and a friend, invited me to go to church. It was one of those churches where the preaching was really good, but you want to raise your hand 5 or 6 times in the middle of the sermon and ask questions, and they wouldn't let you do that. So I found that very frustrating. And I hear some churches now are having Q&A afterwards, which is so smart. I wish they'd all do that. And gradually I met with people who could get my questions answered, and I changed from just believing in God to realizing that there was something much greater there that was being offered, which was not just faith in Christ, but the opportunity to get to know Christ as a living person, and to change sort of who was in charge of my life, instead of it just being me, to hand that over.
And this was college and graduate school, I assume.
This was undergrad.
Okay. And did you feel, I think there's an expectation that kind of religious pilgrimage is somehow at odds with the kind of vocation that you have, right? I think when people think about the sciences writ large, but I think maybe especially especially computer science with its associations with sort of, Silicon Valley, this sort of futurism in which the singularity is the only heaven that we're ever going to achieve or something, that there's this sort of inherent tension between that and Christian belief. And did you ever sort of experience that either personally or just culturally in terms of your fellow students, PhDs, and so on?
I certainly have colleagues who speak very much the way I used to speak. Like, how can you believe in something that you can't prove mathematically or show in this way? And in fact, a friend of mine who's a mathematician used to say that to me. How can you believe in something that you can't prove? I only believe in things I can prove. And then one day he was reading a history book, and his friend, who happened to be a Christian, said, why are you reading that history book? You can't prove any of that. And he realized there's a lot of truth that has happened in the past that we can't prove today like you can a mathematical thing. And furthermore, of course, all of our science and our math rest upon axioms and things that we take at faith. So people who think that they can't deal with faith are really just deceiving themselves. All people in science are accepting something on faith. The question is, what is the evidence for that? And do you allow kinds of evidence that are non-scientific?